Several Catholic schools are under heavy scrutiny from the gay and lesbian trans community after they pulled the plug on a play about a cross-dressing boy. This story is getting a lot of traction today. The play, Boys, Girls, and Their Mythological Creatures is the name. It features the story of an 8-year-old Simon who had dreams of becoming a princess and feels trapped by gender stereotypes. The play was scheduled to be performed in the Niagara Falls region of southern Ontario. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Let's go to Chris Wells, joining us from Alberta. He's the faculty director of the Institute for Sexual Minority Studies and Services at the University of Alberta. Good to have you on, Chris. Thanks for this today.
Hi, Todd. My pleasure.
What's your take on this story?
I think it's deeply disappointing to hear about this level of censorship that's happening in schools around transgender issues, if not an outright case of transphobia, as many people are reporting.
When you're talking about a Catholic school, and this board is a Catholic school board, does that change your viewpoint on this story?
I think it just really emphasizes the great difficulty that Catholic schools seem to have around these issues of gender identity and gender expression. We know, for example, that there are many human rights complaints happening in Catholic schools all across the country because they're failing to support, for example, transgender students be able to use bathrooms in accordance with their gender identity. And here they're banning, plays, creativity, artistic expression that talks about gender identity. This is a conversation we should be having in schools because it's one that's affecting our youth immensely.
Obviously, when you're dealing with religion, it can make it tricky for school boards here. The school board in question, Chris, says the message of this play would simply go beyond the heads of students watching it. They wouldn't quite understand what exactly the play was trying to get across. Do you believe that?
We've seen that argument used before with LGBT books that have been banned from elementary schools and gone all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Supreme Court has stated that is the job of education to create that kind of cognitive dissonance. But it's the job of teachers also to help young people learn about diversity and difference. In fact, it's through that cognitive dissonance that we actually learn. That's how we learn, by going from what we don't know to what we're being taught.
We know that in the past, gay straight alliances, student alliances within schools in the Catholic board have been contentious in the past. I know that Alberta wrestled with this issue as well not that long ago. How do you think this kind of issue, though, this play, how should the Catholic school board have handled it in Niagara Falls?
Well, you're right, Todd. And in fact, here in Alberta, we had a bishop that talked about transgender issues as a form of gender ideology. I think you need to have an open discussion. I think it's important that these publicly funded schools are not supporting discriminatory actions or behaviors or conversation. I think, as we've seen, we're in the middle of what many have called the gender revolution, where young people are really challenging and changing the way that we understand gender. In fact, in Canadian society, a recent Angus Reid poll showed that over 80% of Canadians strongly believe that gender identity should be a protected ground against discrimination in our laws and legislation. So it's unconscionable to think that Catholic schools would be continuing to perpetuate this kind of discrimination because it's out of step of what the majority of Canadians actually believe our country is about.
We'll see how it plays out, Chris. Thank you for coming on CTV with your take on it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.